This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, this is the third session of our conference, and it will be focused on Albania in the Western Union and the European Union, past, present, in the Western Balkans, I'm sorry, and the European Union, past, present, and future. We have very distinguished colleagues who will talk about the relationship of Albania and the European Union and some other issue related to this European integration. Also, we have a senior lecturer from the University of Pisa who will talk about the relationship, historical timeline of the relationship between Albania and the European Union, and some critical ways of looking to this European integration process. So let's start. First of us will be our professor of the Department of Political Sciences, Professor Merita Xhumari. We'll talk about the role of the European Union in promoting research in Western Balkans. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you, and congratulations for organizing this very interesting conference in such a special environment. I'd like to be focused on the role of the European Union in promoting research in Western Balkans, which is very important, not only for academics and universities, but in a broader sense. Over the last 3 decades, the education system has gone through substantial changes as the result of the market economy, and Klodiana, are you following me? And privatization. So, if we will see what has happened in all Western Balkan countries after 2005, private universities are opened and their number has exceeded the number of public universities. In all the universities was established the Bologna system of education, which facilitated university studies abroad and mobility, and especially facilitate labor force migration, which is mainly focused on youth migration. Due to such dynamic social changes, the modern society is developing rapidly into a knowledge-based society, as was defined in the Europe 2020 strategy, which has been as the basic document for orientation of all the Western Balkan strategic documents. So, and in this context, society is expecting universities to transform themselves and at the same time to take up the role of the agent of social transformation. That in this context, science research to offer problem solution faced by the modern society. The World Bank, as well as the Regional Coordination Council in the Sarajevo, has prepared the first Western Balkan regional strategy for research and innovation in 2013. And later on, it was extended not only for Western Balkan, but for all Southeast European countries, Research and Development Strategy for Innovation 2020. The main objective is to promote innovation and foster knowledge-driven growth. So, Western Balkan regional approach is important, and for this aim, the international policy actors such as World Bank, ILO, UN has played a very important role. After 2003, we see the special role of the European Union in the framework of stabilization and association process with the aim of establishing common objectives, indicators, and research network in Western Balkans. In this context, CARDS project has been the first. We played a very important role for the first regional comparative studies of the social institutional reform in Western Balkans. Regional cooperation facilitated researchers' mobility as a way to face the limitation of the opportunities in a specific country and to share the best innovative approach, because these countries are facing almost the same challenges, and sharing the experience is very important in this context. What is the main objectives of the research activities? To contribute to policy-relevant decision-making process and to influence the necessary systematic changes in the society. And the main scientific objective is to identify the gaps between citizens, policymakers, and scholar expert argumentation, and to explore the ways of treating them. So, in a broader sense, and I'm very happy that Klodiana, as a member of Department of Political Science, has leading this kind of discussion, because today in political science is talked about evidence-based policy, and in Albania we still don't know this new approach in political science. That's why promotion of science research is important in addressing the knowledge gaps and ensuring the comprehensive evidence for policy design and implementation. So despite different projects in Western Balkan countries, we still are countries with less investment in research. Another very important for our as academics and the universities in Western Balkan is to develop a research-based teaching, which is almost missing in all the universities. I'm listing here some of my last research, which I usually use for my students. I have been lucky in a sense that being part of team of foreign professors which has developed a scientific, very rigorous scientific methodology, I can use this for explaining findings and challenges faced by the society, modern society, but not only in general in Western Balkans, but especially also for Albania. And regarding Albanian case, focus on the research, we have had a national strategy of research, technology development and innovation for the period Science 2009, with many objectives for increasing the government support for research, but till now none of this objective has been in place. In 2015, we have a new law on higher education and science research, which want to make research a strategic orientation of higher education. Academics should be evaluated on teaching and research. Students should have been teachers from those who also are engaged in research, and to explain the main concept, not just by reading and translating books, foreign books, but also from their own experience. A national agency for scientific research and innovation is also created. PhD programs, which was increased drastically for the period 2011-2014, and from the time was stopped. Universities have signed the EU recommendation on European Chart of Researchers and Behavior Code for recruiting of researchers as part of European Erasmus network. And during the period 2015-2019, European Union has invested so much in Albania that about more than 5,000 participant students, academic exchange under the Erasmus Plus and other projects, as well as the civil society organizations. Why is important capacity building in research and how the European Union is investing in this direction? let's be referring to the chapter 25 of the Acquis Communautaire on Research, Science and Research, that each country of the Western Balkans should prepare each year a report and should declare what they have done in the field of research to respond to the requirements of the process of European integration. There are other research projects, Horizon 2020, Cost Action, etc., which aims to strengthen the capacity at national level to better absorb the research funds from the European Union, because you know that as all other countries, we are paying a fee to participate in such kind of research project, but we are not, we have not many applications as Albania, comparing to Serbia, even to Macedonia. And a study done in 2016 on universities in Western Balkans have shown the need for more efforts from universities in Western Balkans to be involved in research projects. Access to databases to improve research methodologies for analyzing public policies in Western Balkans, and especially a joint research agenda on argumentation in public policy making and coordination of researchers is very important in this direction. Based on a study that I have done with two main universities in Albania, University of Tirana, then European University of Tirana, one public and one private, I come in the conclusion that researchers to be known as a profession in Albania. It is very important to be promoted this profession at the higher education institution, because we should establish some recruitment and performance criteria for the academic staff to motivate them to be engaged in research, and to put some strong eligibility criteria for PhD students, to support them not only during the period of research, which is considered as they finish with research. It should be considered just as the starting point for continuing research during all their life. And National Agency of Research and Innovation that we have in Albania, the same agencies are also in other Western Balkan countries, should play a very important role in this direction to enable researchers on the database access and to facilitate it, previous studies, and to promote involvement on the European research area. And to conclude with some recommendation, it is important. I am focused recommendation on higher education institutions, as we are part of the university, and at least we should give a kind of contribution to our institution. The first thing is to design strategic vision, because it is missing until now for knowledge management and research, that the academic staff to be part of the European research area. Higher education institutions to implement the European Chart of Science Research and the Code of Behavior of Research Recruitment, which is ratified by them, Science 2014. The public institution to facilitate the access in the official databases, which should be accessible online for everybody. And the university to have agreements between different faculties and public, private, NGOs organization for consultancy research on national priorities of development. And as well, for higher education institutions, it's important to enable online libraries, bulletins, scientific bulletins, conference publication, original research project, which is almost missing in our universities, to enable comparative studies, networking between the researchers, not only in the Western Balkan region, but also with the European universities. Thank you. This is some of my main ideas based on my recent research activities on universities and on the other topics related with Western Balkans and the role, special role, very important, I can say, of the European Union in this direction.
Thank you, Professor Xhumari. I want to remind you, by the way, that we will have the chance to publish the papers or the articles of this conference in one special issue of our journal, scientific journal of the Department Politica. So please stick to the time, and then we will send an email for further elaboration of all your ideas and thoughts of today. Thank you, Professor Xhumari, for reminding us the importance of the evidence-based policies, research-based teaching of the capacity building, and the researcher to be known as a profession. We all know that this conference is part of the regional cooperation and Erasmus Plus program within the framework of the research and education. We will continue with the education topic, which is a very important topic for our country and for Western Balkans also, with Professor Nevila Xhindi of the Mediterranean University of Albania. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudie. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conference. I really appreciate being today with my colleagues, and that's a very important thing that we moving forward towards the Erasmus Plus program. Like you are the head of Jean Monnet Module. I was a Jean Monnet chair, so I know the importance of and the responsibilities of being a Jean Monnet. So I really congratulate you, University of Tirana and SCiDEV, organizing this conference. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of the results. I mean, it's more empirical thing that I'll be talking about. Some of the results that of a survey that we did with a group age of 16 to 18 years old. So before starting with the results of the surveys and talking about some recommendation, I will just briefly talk about values, why those European values are so important to our education. Education absolutely is one of the keystones to ensure the sustainable and peaceful development in our society. And we all know that a civilized society cannot function unless it's supported by three equal important pillars: democracy, economic stability and welfare, and education. The civic dimension of education has now become a priority within the European Commission Work Plan 2020, but many other initiatives are being taken from other institutions. Human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, the respect for human rights, including the rights for persons belonging to minorities, are values which are shared by the European Union members. They form the fabric of the Union that binds countries, that will bind Albania soon, communities and people that work together. And this is outlined in Article 2 in the Treaty of Lisbon. While the government of Albania now is engaged in EU-related reform, we all know that there is a lack of comprehensive information in public debate and dialogue about the EU integration, the accession process, and all the related reforms. And we know that inclusive and high-quality education and training at all levels is so important. They create the paramount for creating and maintaining a cohesive European society. Learning about Europe, the common cultural heritage, diversity, is a strong element for understanding on how to be part of the European Union. The origins, the functioning of the European Union is essential knowledge that we need to be tomorrow the citizens, the EU citizens. Exactly this kind of framework, let's say, was laid down in a survey that was done from the Mediterranean Center within a project Young Towards Europe. It was a project funded from the IPA funding, based on the increasing the capacity, building the capacity of young people for policy dialogue and awareness in European integration process. Was in partnership with two other members, the Bulgarian School of Politics and another NGO, EDA Institute in Albania. Briefly, the study, which the main thing of the core of the study is the questionnaire, is based on the survey on European dimension in education with high school students about their perception in EU integration, EU values, and key institutions. Results from this survey are indicative, and they show us the status quo of the Albanian high school students, how they are informed about the EU processes and Albania and EU. Based on the study, I'll briefly will share with you some of the key elements. The main information resource that youth in Albania have regarding European Union is from TV. And they do not encounter, and they not discuss with the friends or the family. From the institution, they have heard about the European Parliament, but they don't know anything about European Court. Only 7% said that they know about the European Commission and what the European Commission does. Youth in Albania generally has a clear, let's say a general information regarding the creation of the EU. What they say is that the 90% of the responders declared the European Union is a group of states that comes together for peacekeeping and stability. And that's exactly a question that relates to the answer that they give, that 21 of them, they still think that Albania accessing EU is due to peacekeeping and stability in the region. There is a confusion about the numbers of the countries in the EU. After Brexit, sure, they don't know that we are talking now about 27 countries and not 28 anymore. And 79% of the respondents believe that the most important element in which EU was funded is collaboration through countries. None of them mark economy as one of the important things that makes EU together. Free movement is the main benefit that the youth believe that they will have being part of the EU. Many of them, they clicked, I can tell the figure, it's 75 of them click that they will emigrate soon into the EU. And saying that, still half of the respondents were skeptical about the membership that Albania will have. And clearly, 26 of them think that Albania will be a member of the EU in 2025. And 45 of them think that Albania will be a member of the EU in 2030. Sure, while fostering citizenship education and promoting education in EU schools, it's definitely a formal work that needs to be done in improving democratic culture and political literacy in the national level. A lack of awareness and the origins of the Union, the reason for its creation and the basic functioning, it's almost misinformed. And the school has only 23% in this information because, as I mentioned before, TV is the main player. Education in all of its type and at all levels and from an early age we know that plays an important role in promoting common values. So some of the recommendations of the studies that I would like to share with you today is that to strengthen the sense of European identity in young generation, to clarify the value of civilization and the European citizenship in two dimensions: political, so being a citizen, and psychological, feeling like a citizen. To prepare young generation to take part in Europe's economic, social, and cultural development, to develop in young generation awareness and advantages, challenges, and obstacles that may bring being part of the European Union, to promote and to improve knowledge image of Europe, to offer opportunities to improve quality in education, to favor shared principles and values, individual liberties and democracy. Values are universal ideas and the principles of guiding the behavior of individuals and communities. Therefore, European values should be part of the education system in teaching and learning them, because the values are important for young people, so they can reflect the direction and the change that the culture of our society needs in these days. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for making me part of this conference, and I'm eager to listen to my colleagues for furthermore. Thank you.
Thank you, Nevila, for bringing us this very interesting perspective on norms, European norms and principles. Sometimes we take them for granted, and your study shows exactly the contrary, that young people still need to focus on them and to really absorb or to socialize with these norms and principles. I think all our society needs this, but starting from the young people could be a good point. Now we will continue with Albania in the European Union. It's not very common to listen to the perspective of a researcher who lives in the European Union. Simone Paoli from the University of Pisa will talk about this historical timeline. The floor is yours, Simone.
Thank you, Klodiana. Thank you, all of you. Unfortunately, my camera doesn't work, but I'm really happy, really honored to be here and to participate in this conference. I participated in conferences in many countries in Europe and even outside Europe, but I admit that it's the first time that I participate in a conference in Albania, and I'm really happy to be here, even if I'm not physically present in your marvelous city. In the short time at my disposal, I will outline the complex and multifaceted relationship between the EU and Albania on the basis of the available literature and primary sources. As I am an historian, so the methodology that I use is different from the methodology used by political scientists. Since it is a paper, not a thriller, I will anticipate his main conclusions, not least because I'm not sure I will have enough time to present all of it. The first conclusion is that the European Union seems more interested in Albania because of its fragility than because of its potentialities. The risks it posed being perceived as greater than the opportunities it offered. After the collapse of this communist regime, Albania was often seen as a potential and sometimes actual source of instability and insecurity which needed to be tackled. Which an aim to reduce threats to the EU and its members, Brussels implemented a strategy made up of financial assistance, political conditionality, and later prospect of membership. In Brussels' view, this is important, Albania was always considered as a piece of the greater Western Balkan puzzle. The second conclusion is that, despite delays, limitations, and contradictions, this strategy seemed quite successful. And if Albania is today more stable, democratic, and prosperous than 30 or 20 years ago, it is also thanks to the European Union. The third conclusion, finally, is that Italy played a major role in making Brussels aware of the strategic importance of this small but important country, and of the value of letting it enter the European Union. This was due to Italy's special relationship with Albania, as well as to the willingness to share the burden of its stabilization. It is well known that during the Enver Hoxha era between the mid-40s and mid-80s, Albania was isolated from the West, and after the late 70s, even from the East. Relations between Tirana and Brussels, accordingly, were virtually non-existent for this entire period. International isolation survived the demise of Hoxha and the rise to power of Ramiz Alia in the mid-80s. The situation radically changed only in 1990, when, following other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, anti-regime revolts spread all over the country. In a desperate attempt to regain control, the Albanian government accelerated liberal reforms, and went as far as to announce the willingness to join the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. This was the first international forum where representatives from Albania and Western European countries entered into formal dialogue. Meanwhile, with the aim of gaining political and economic support, Aliyah asked to establish formal relations with the European community. This early attempt came to nothing. Brussels did not trust the regime in Tirana and more generally did not consider Albania as a priority. Domestic reforms and international opening were not enough to stop neither civil unrest nor mass migration. Against this dramatic background, in 1991, the Albanian government decided to insist and send a delegation to Brussels in order to express their willingness to be part of the greater European family and urge financial and humanitarian resources. Significantly, all the main Albanian parties agreed on the idea that the community represented the only viable solution to national problems. Brussels, which did not have a presence there, stayed once again vague on Albanian requests. The deterioration of the situation, however, led the community to reconsider its position and to take responsibility for the crisis. Pressures from Italy and Greece, which were flooded with massive amounts of migrants, were crucial in this shift, together with an increasing awareness of the risks for the community coming from instability in the whole Western Balkan region. After that, Albania joined the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in mid-1991, the European Commission provided Albania with financial assistance and food and health aid. It also proposed a bilateral agreement on trade and cooperation and decided to admit Albania as a beneficiary of the FAIR and Tempus programs. In the early 90s, Albania thus became the largest per capita recipient of foreign aid in Europe. The community which provided more than 1/4 of that was the largest donor. The Brussels commitment to the Albanian stabilization was confirmed in 1992, after the victory of Salih Berisha and his Democratic Party. The community in Albania signed the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and the Joint Political Declaration, which provided a model for the entire region. In the same year, Albania applied to join the Council of Europe, and after 3 years, it joined it. Surprisingly enough, between 1992 and 1997, Albania was considered by Brussels as one of the most promising candidates for association in the area. Albania seemed to enjoy economic growth and a relatively stable political and social situation. Unlike most Balkan countries, in addition, it was not affected by significant ethnic and religious tensions. It was ready, too, to adopt all the most radical economic reforms suggested by the Bretton Woods institutions, and both its political system and public opinion were overwhelmingly and enthusiastically pro-Western, pro-European, and pro-capitalist. Albania was admitted to the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the newly established European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It also felt confident enough to apply first country in post-communist Europe to join the NATO and to ask for association agreement and negotiation with the European Union. Despite the EU's optimism, however, the Albanian democratic system was deteriorating, as clearly showed by the failed constitution in 1994 and the parliamentary elections in 1996. Despite positive outlooks from the Bretton Woods institutions, meanwhile, the domestic economic situation collapsed dramatically in 1997. The EU provided humanitarian assistance, but it became much more disillusioned with this country. Once again, most of the responsibilities and costs of stabilization fell on one of its members, Italy. The landslide victory of Fatos Nano and the Socialist Party in 1997 and the parallel end of civil unrest contributed to reassure the international community, the European Union in particular. Brussels deployed the Customs Assistance Mission in Albania and granted Tirana preferential tariffs and access to the European single market. More importantly, it intensified its commitment to the democratization of the country, plain and indirect but fundamental role in shaping the 1998 Albanian constitution. Meanwhile, the European Union became more concerned and involved with the Western Balkan region as a whole, not least because of conflicts in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo and tensions in Macedonia. Albania, as part of this area, was included in the stabilization and association process launched in 1999 and strengthened in 2003. Between 1999 and 2001, Albania worked hard to meet the political, social, and economic conditions to sign a stabilization and association agreement with the EU. Despite undeniable progresses, however, the Albanian authorities appear unable to enhance efficiency and independence of the judiciary, and more importantly, to clamp down on widespread corruption and criminality. The political instability following elections in 2001 further aggravated the situation. The personal commitment of the Commission President, Italian Romano Prodi, and the consensus appointment of Alfred Maisiu as President of Albania in 2002 facilitated the opening of negotiations. Though later than expected, the EU and Albania signed the Stabilization and Association Agreement in 2006, which was ratified in 2009. Actually, it then seemed to many commentators in Brussels more the result of the European benevolence than that of Albanian progresses. Domestic reforms in the defense and security policy sectors, meanwhile, paved the way to the Albanians' entry into the NATO in 2009. Immediately afterwards, the government in Tirana applied to join the EU, and the Commission, albeit with some reservations, asked the Council to grant Albania the status of candidate state. The Council gave Albanian citizens the long-awaited visa-free access to the Schengen area, but it put a membership application on hold. The slowness of reform adoption and implementation played a part, together with uncertain outcomes of national elections in 2009 and the disputed local elections in the capital in 2011. Albania was granted the candidate or candidate state only in 2014, during the Greek European Union presidency and on the eve of the Italian EU presidency. The European Union, however, made it clear that before entering into access negotiations, Albania needed to radically reform its electoral process, public administration and judiciary, protect human and minority rights, and curb endemic corruption and criminality. I'm going to conclude my short presentation. Despite efforts and some partial success, in 2018, Albanian ambitions and aspirations were frustrated by France and the Netherlands. Under Cyprus' leadership, Greece too showed hesitancy due to the alleged lack of respect of the rights of the Greek minority in Albania. France and the Netherlands, plus Denmark, confirmed their opposition in 2019. While France wanted to postpone the entire enlargement process, the Netherlands and Denmark were more specifically concerned with Albania, which was then undergoing alarming revolts. Germany was better disposed towards Albania, but not less adamant about the respect of political conditions. Under pressure from most member states, the presidency of the EU, the Commission, and the European Parliament, the European Council has recently agreed to open accession talks with Albania, even if enthusiasm for enlargement has generally vanished in the EU. In my opinion, there is a lot at stake for the European Union. And this is the reason why, in my personal opinion, it is in the interest of the European itself to allow Albania to join the European Union and to put aside its doubts. The risk is not only the destabilization of Albania and Western Balkans, but also the loss of credibility and influence in a crucial area for the European Union. Russia and China, after all, are ready to take advantage of any hesitancy and any vacuum. Thanks for your attention, and thanks again for having invited me to participate in this discussion.
Thank you, Simone. We are looking forward to your article, to your paper, if you are going to publish it with us, in order to see another kind of research sources that you presented us here. It was an optimistic way to see the Albanian European integration. And now we'll leave the floor to Edon Qesari, who, in my opinion, will have a less optimistic perspective on this process.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. I will try very hard to remain respectful to the limits of time. Now, my primary concern regarding the topic of this conference goes to aspects of the image that the EU, in its broadest meaning, political, economic, and most of all cultural and social, has in the Western Balkans, especially in Albania, especially in this very moment, when it seems that current developments after the spread of COVID-19 are distancing the EU from what was considered to be the aim of the functionalist idea, which, as you all know, carried the bigger weight of that incredible journey that began in 1951 and later became known to us as the European Union. Well, in my opinion, the damage caused to the communitarian aspirations by the 2008 financial crisis was unbearable for a union that remains still and locked, or I should rather say trapped, between two master plans. If Europe should conserve its current framework, which is basically an interstate embodiment, or if it should transform itself in a real, well-balanced community where national sovereignties are willing to develop their might to some higher authorities. Besides this very profound and dilemma, highlighted by the deplorable incapability with which the European Union is reacting still today to the coronavirus crisis, this situation is triggering clashes not only amid its member states, symbolized by a long season of disagreements between Italy and France on one hand and Germany and Netherlands on the other, but it's also a problem between this concrete and brutalizing European reality, which resembles more and more to a Westphalian soft scenario than to a Maastrichtian heritage, and on the other hand, an idealistic vision of Europe, standardized democratic mechanism, as it is normal in the mainstream political mind all over the Western Balkans. And I'm talking about countries that have put their hopes, I'd say in an artificial fashion, on the chance of being, one day in the future, part of what seems to me a demoralized union. And I have some good reasons for being, as Claudia said before, so pessimistic. In regard to what I've mentioned before, we have assisted today in a total lack of any critical debate in Albania about how the EU is tackling the coronavirus challenge amid its member states. In Albania, there exists a common shared European aspiration that is a conservative one, if you think. It allows, as a matter of fact, an actual absence of it follows, as a matter of fact, an actual absence of critical inquiry that has its genesis in the first half of the 1990s, when EU was, on one hand, very different from what is today, and on the other, Europe per se was perceived just like a remedy for what a young liberal democracy like Albania wasn't able to achieve. During those times, Europe was a solution to ourselves. Worse, it assumed the form of a monolithic and despotic ideological leviathan, undisputed and used as a electoral cliche. Desperately, it still continues to be like this. In Albania, political society and civil society, I'm using these two Hegelian categories dear to Antonio Gramsci, are promoting still the same idea about an EU, which is very different from what our aspirations would like it to be. To a real Europe, where Greece in 2015 and Italy in 2020 represent two paradigmatic failures, and tragic if you think about the meaning that a founder state of it, like Italy has, and the cultural reference like Greece embody, the non-existent critical debate in Albania still offers the image of an Olympic community. I think that today it's very important that an official candidate like Albania is, observes very carefully, and as a consequence, put the roots of a critical driven public debate about Europe, starting from these examples, from Greece and Italy. Because Greece and Italy today are the way how these countries have been treated during this crisis. I'd say Italy and Greece lied about failing a member state, alas, with weak economy and poor structures in law enforcement and rule of law, broadly speaking. Then the political and intellectual sphere might be allowed to argue about Albania's own place inside the European Union. But I see it only as a path to be taken once we have understood what it is, as a matter of fact, Europe. If it is to be taken for granted as a historical geographical notion, it starts from its Greek-Latin roots, but we should add that Europe, which exists in the map, but not in Brussels. If Europe, in fact, a Western Europe, and to us it is just a mere financial opportunity, and here we have to take into account countries that precedes us and what they benefit from being today part of Europe. That's why I've mentioned Greece, Italy, or Spain, and so on and so forth. Or Europe is mostly a polity. Means an institutional and a rational framework with its own problematic challenges, its failures, but still very far from being an inspiration if today, 30 years after, we are still struggling with the same difficulties in harmonizing ourselves, our institutions, to Europe's. So I will conclude just with an expression: food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Edon, for this interesting insight and perspective of yours. I wish we could start from Nevila's perspective and give more knowledge and information to the young students, and to finish with Edon's perspective, critic perspective on the EU. And not to have to fill the gap of the information still at the university level. Now, since we don't have questions for the panelists, I would invite all the panelists here to have the final word, the final remark, a final comment on whatever topic or argument we tackled during this panel. It has been a long day for us, so no wonder if you want to close this session as soon as possible, but we have the possibility to conclude this session, to conclude our thoughts and the results, and to have some results. Yes? Professor Xhumari, Xhindi, would you like to add something?
As I was focused on research, I hope that in the coming years, the University of Tirana to spend more attention on encouraging young researchers and promoting them in their research career, which is a very difficult one, and to assist them to develop the new approach in research-based teaching, which is very important for all the European American universities in our modern society.
I totally agree with your idea. We really need to have a stronger research, not only as a profession, but also as a production of our work. As you said, teaching, research-based teaching, we should promote it. What about you, Professor Xhindi? How is the situation of the research in your university, and how do you see more broadly in the educational system in Albania?
Thank you, Claudie. It's a very challenging question, actually, because now that, as Professor Xhumari said, now we should talk about evidence policy. And even farther, I mean, in England, they are talking about impact policy. And while here in Albania, we're still struggling, not being a researcher, but being also a university professor. So the status we have is flexible. It's sometimes we are vulnerable, and sometimes it's so hard to do research. And we know, I mean, Professor Xhumari listed all the difficulties and the problems we have. But what I see is that we definitely it needs more information and awareness and capacities, for sure, to be part of these big projects. And I would say that, at least for myself, I was one of the first being part of the cost actions. And now I can clearly say that I was one of the 8 people in 2010 that applied to be a cost member. Today, there are 100, I guess. And I got to know this figure in one of the conferences done for the cost actions in Albania, which means that we are engaged and we are participating in their conferences and we are involved in research, even though I would say clearly that is not much appreciated in this country, and is not even much appreciated in our environment. I mean, sure, due to the lack of support, institutional support, and due to a very low R&D development in Albania, we don't have the means to do a real research. And we don't have the financial means, we don't have the environment that supports research. It's hard for a professor to do a lot of teaching hours, to do administrative work, and in the end of the day, it should perform excellently in research with no environment, with no support. So I would say that maybe one of the recommendations should be that even though those normative acts that comes forward after the law, they are not really appropriate based on the real assumptions. I mean, simply saying, I haven't done a research, but I would like to know how much of or what is the percentage that the universities give to the research, and how do they deal with the research? That might be a big question. But in terms of budget, I mean, private universities are more flexible, definitely. In terms of bureaucracy also. Do we need to do more? Definitely. I would say that we don't do research, really. We work with whatever we have in our environment, but the real research has another meaning. And I think many of us that we presented today, we know what the real research means. So, but I would like also to add a little thing, as I was talking about youth being involved and being, engaged in EU processes. We should do definitely more. Not only awarenessing them on the benefits of being EU members, but warning them that there is responsibilities too, and we all need to do some homework, and it starts from being a responsible individual, correct politically and psychologically. So be a member of the EU is not just a geographical mean, or is not a peace thing for stability of the region. It's more than that. So I would emphasize that we need more information and knowledge, because all we have so far, at least from the questionnaire we did, is information. It's not knowledge yet about EU values and also responsibilities of each of us being tomorrow a EU member. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we face nearly the same problems. You partly answered to the question that Yasmina has sent: what strategies can be used to encourage youth empowerment? Edon, you work very closely with young people, with young students. Do you have any idea of how we can make them be more aware for their rights as citizens and everything?
I started with a little bit of pessimism, which pointed exactly to what I defined is a lack or absence of critical debate regarding the EU. In Albania, the EU is not only an abstract notion, but it attains to concrete political measures. Instruction, education are some of them. Now after this session, and tomorrow, I think after the end of the conference, I shall feel happy to be partly wrong in my assumptions. I mentioned the name of Gramsci before. There is a statement from this political theorist. For him, the pessimism of the intellect or of the intelligence should go hand in hand with the optimism of the will. Yes, I am glad to think about this initiative as a demonstration of a goodwill to critically at least observe the engagement of this country in different fields or action, the engagement of this country toward the EU. So I should conclude saying thank you to all the organizers.
Simone, we started from another direction and we have arrived in a totally different direction. But since we are here, I'd like to know, how is the situation for the young people in Italy regarding or related to the European Union? What's their perception?
Yeah, first of all, Klodiana, let me thank you again for having given me the opportunity to participate in this really stimulating debate. I heard very interesting papers with a lot of different and even innovative methodologies and approaches. As I told you, Klodiana, I am an historian, so as you know, as historian, I have not the responsibility to make to guess the future or even to interpret the present. We have only the ambition to try to interpret the past. But I do not want, of course, to escape from your question. Incidentally, my PhD was on the education policies of the European Union. So you were speaking about a topic that is very close to my area of knowledge and interest. I think that at this moment in time, Europe, especially in the youth, is a very distant concept and a very distant organization. If I compare the youth generation with mine, so with the generation of senior brothers, I see that there was a decrease in the attachment to Europe. And in my opinion, this was due to two main reasons, and probably this is the mistake that you should try to avoid. The impression that I have, the first reason has to do with the excessive expectations that we had about the European Union. Many times we had the idea that the European Union was the external agent that should magically solve all our problems. The European Union is not this for many reasons, because it cannot, and because it doesn't want to be the agent that magically solve the problems of everyone. And the second reason has to do with something that also Edon mentioned. In Italy, as in Albania, for many years there was not a debate on the European Union. Everyone were Europeanist. There was not a critical debate on Europe. And in my opinion, this was a mistake. In my opinion, there is the need to speak about the European Union also in a critical way, in order to strengthen Europeanism, in order to create a critical thinking about it. For many years, in my opinion, for too many years, for example, Erasmus, Jean Monnet chairs were a sort of propaganda chairs in European universities. We have to pass to a new way to look at Europe in order to strengthen the European sentiment. So if you want to know my opinion at this moment in time, there is less Europeanism in the youth. This was due to the mistakes that were made to communicate Europe, and of course also to the many mistakes that the European Union made. But if we can learn something, we have to learn that the European Union should not become the new common sense, should not become the new single thinking. Also, the European Union can be criticized in order to strengthen it.
I think we all agree with this, and we have already started to do it in our auditoriums. Thank you, everybody. I have to thank you really for being here, especially to Merita, who has made a struggle to be with us till the end of this session. It was a real pleasure to have you here. We hope to see again each other in the next opportunities, next collaborations. We will see each other again tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We'll talk about Jean Monnet Network and Jean Monnet other projects we have in mind to apply for. Till then, I hope to see some of you again tomorrow. I wish you a very good evening, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.